The idea for this staff break grew out of a conversation I had with Stewart regarding his research on these records and what he finds in them. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. He spends a lot of time in them, knows a lot about them. It might be interesting for him to give us a little presentation for those of us who tend to be generalists and know a lot about many different types of records, but not do a deep dive into some of the series. And this is a series that sounds like it has a lot of promise for information, and we don't often know as much about them as we do other series of records. So I'm going to let Stewart take it over and tell us what you know about these records.
Well, thank you all for coming out, and I want to thank Director Kuntz for allowing me to take your time to talk about these records. I consider these the least known or probably the least used records, and yet, even though they're on the bottom of the list of a genealogist finally will get to them, I think there's enough information in here that they probably merit a little bit higher up on the list. After transcribing, most of you all know me here in the archives, as photographing and transcribing these records over the past 8 years, I have seen common themes that I want to share with you. So this presentation is going to be more about how they are to be used than a presentation about the details behind the documents. So we're going to get an overview just to give you a little bit of an idea why they're here, ideas of their use, which is really the focus, some examples, and then at the very end I have a map that shows the coverage of these records across the state of North Carolina. All of these records are they're legal documents. So this is going to be focusing on freeholders, people that are residents. So those that are researching transients as they come through the state of North Carolina, they may not be the best place to come, yet you will find a lot of lawsuit material that may mention a person coming through. But I think this is really the crux. These are legal documents. Now, hopefully it's kind of self-evident that these are infrastructure-based records. The British knew well if they're going to come into the state, they needed to get the people from the coast inland. So how are we going to populate and subdue the state? They needed these records. In fact, an act of assembly in 1715 is the beginning of getting those records, getting this process out of the General Assembly and into the county. So 1715 is the earliest county record. This is the earliest they could begin. There are no 1715 records. Sadly, the old records just weren't that well preserved. The earliest, I think, is 1728. So this is the beginning, and all of the records that I'm talking about were approved to the county courts, the pleas and quarter sessions in 1715 as one lump. Now, I'm going to give just a FYI. This is a little post-it note for you. There is a thing called patroller records. They're rare. They appear in the road records, and patrollers were a process to police slaves, ensuring they weren't off the plantation and that they weren't armed without a slip. So this was an act of 1754. It was enhanced in 94. Why are they in these records? Because you either worked on the road or you were a patroller. So this was a means whereby you could swap your service. Now, they're very rare. I'm not going to talk about them. Now, as I travel, I have to be honest, I'm a book salesman. And as I travel with the North Carolina Genealogical Society and other historical groups, I run into a lot of people and they go, oh, yeah, you're that overseer guy. As soon as you say road records, oh, yeah, that's the overseer guy. But truly, in my research for Revolutionary War books, the real, what I consider the crux, the pot of gold, is going to be the petition. So the laws are required you to petition for a brand new road, to close a road, to alter a road, or, finally, I think in early America, you could finally say, I don't want it. So it's the petition that I think was the real detailed information I want to get my hands on. That goes to the county court. The court then says, looks right, smells right, yeah, okay. Sheriff then gets 12 to 15 freeholders. They come out to the area and they approve the record or the request, and then they give a report back. Yes, road should go from here to there, or they can say, no, I think it really should. So the petition can say, I want to go this way, and they come out there and say, no, it should really go that way. So it's this group of records that I call my pot of gold. This is if you're going to get detail, it's in this group of records that are going to give you the road route details or the bridge construction details. Now, there are overseer appointments. Whoa, yeah, there are overseers, yes. Now, an overseer is a supervisor. It's a man appointed to gather a group of men called hands on a stretch of road to go out twice a year, spring and fall, to level the road, and there's a list of things they must go do in the law. So there is an overseer. We'll talk briefly about them a little bit later on. And then as we get through the Civil War, we start to see the population increase, that they create a thing called road reports, which is the beginning of townships, and it's another level of management. Now we have a manager, as I call them, over the supervisors, which are the overseers, and their hands. So for example, when I say a overseer has hands, the neighbors, to work a stretch of road, that could be 40 people. So now you have an overseer with 40, and now you have a road supervisor, as they call them, with a number of overseers under them, and they provide a report on a township basis. So it's just another level as we started to populate the state. And then what I was really searching for when I started this thing 8 years ago was maps. Got to be somebody who's going to draw a map and says, yeah, it's from here to there. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. All of these, what I call infrastructure records, for a genealogist, I hope is clear freeholders. They want that surname. This is clearly the place. And there are a lot of surnames. And that's why I'm saying, as I go around with genealogists, they go, yeah, we check here, check here. Oh, I finally went to the road records. So that's the place. In the 18th century, it tends to be that the middle name is spelled. I know in my genealogy, in my family, we could never figure out what the middle initial B dot was. What was the B? And so I do recommend in legal documents, they tend to spell the middle name. And then we get into, like I swear after the Civil War, everybody was, J.B. Dunaway or J.L., you never see anybody's name, but this is a better place. Here's a place, death certificates. Would you ever come to the road records to find out when someone died? Well, of course not. Absolutely fantastic. There are 2 avenues where you can use these records for this information. It's inferred or implied by widow, deceased, heirs of, minors of. It's a possibility you could get more year or era where you'll see a road going past Stewart Dunaway's plantation, and then the next year it's widow Dunaway's plantation. So that would be an inferred way to see someone passed away. Now here I'm going to make a point very clear, as I have transcribed 20,000 records, that you will see absolutely amazing situations where someone will be petitioning for moving a road past Stewart Dunaway's plantation, deceased, parentheses, who died February 8th, 1752. And you're like, why? So it's amazing where I run into month, day, year death records. Now why? We're dealing with what? Land, legal land, and even under British rule, man, legal land was a real serious issue. And so everybody wanted to know who really owned that piece of property. And a dead person was an important relationship. And so you will find an amazing collection of death information in these. When I index my books, man, deceased, death, widow, this is the place to come. Now we know there's a census missing in our country that got destroyed. I'm also amazed as someone gets upset in a township over someone altering a road and the whole township comes out. In fact, I brought as an example, someone on Karatek or in Ocracoke Island goes, oh, we want to alter this road. Every resident on that island gets up in arms and signs a petition to say, how dare you, that little island, how dare they alter that road? There you go. You want the census of 1822? I have every resident on there. So it's another little bit out there, but that's an option. Church records. Now, I don't mean church membership records. There are 2 avenues, and it's a very common occurrence, where the rare avenue is that a church would petition for a road. It's pretty rare because truly churches are erected on well-established routes and, they're pretty well known. But the more common occurrence is someone blocking the members to church. And it occurs more, finally they do an act of assembly that says you can't do that. But I think it's in all the records that I've done across the state, I just get a sneaking suspicion that someone doesn't like that particular faith and they block it up. And so what you'll see is a petition of every member or the pastor and his member saying, how dare they block the road to this church? And boom, there it is. Everybody's in there. So it's another area. Now, if we take these records as a whole and say, I'm not looking for a surname, what can we use them for? Well, I think another self-evident fact is migration. How did we get from our coast inland? This would be the place to go to find out about that. And that truly, you have to think about that could be state, that could be region, or it could be township basis, but it's the place to come. Economics. I gave a presentation to UNC and somebody had an elective class and the kids are like, nodding off while in the presentation. I said, well, here's economics. And one of the kids are like, what? Economics? You could do a return on investment. The bridge records have amazing monetary data attached to them. When a bridge is erected in North Carolina, colonial, early America, they had to pay for it out of tax money. And the bridge, when it's constructed, comes with a warranty. The most common warranty is 7 years. My guess biblical. But anyways, so they did a 5, 7, or a 10-year warranty on a bridge. So I told this one student, hey, you go in there and say, why did one county do 5 and another do 7? Because obviously the price of the bridge changed. Caswell County tried 7 years and then 10 years, and then they went back to 7 years. Why? I'll bet you look at that, you're going to find out there was the cost of the bridge. So anyways, so economics, you can do receipts for so much lumber. It's so many dollars a board foot. Timber type, again, with the bridge records, a lot of timber information and a lot of complaints about the lack of timber at certain places at certain times. Professor Dobbs at UNC writes me one day and says, hey, you ever run into hurricane records? She was doing a thing on hurricanes. And I said, well, yeah, and it's interesting that you could go into these records to find weather reports. On my long list of things to do would be I'm cataloging all bridges across the state. One of the things is they get washed away in a bad storm. And you can start to see common occurrences because in August of a particular year, you start to see across counties, everybody's bridge in this area is getting washed away. So there are weather data inside these records. Now, probably the most prolific amount of information is going to be dealing with industry and businesses. We don't put roads through just the convenience of Stewart to go see my aunt. There's sometimes you'll see this type of request, but this is all about businesses. The roads, as they're routed from point A to point B, will always go past a business. And I'm always surprised, depending on where I am in the state and the records, what is the most common request? Well, it's try to get my fish to the wharf, or it's trying to get my naval store stuff to a ferry. So remember, there's a ton of industry information. Now, I make a point. If you ever look at a record and it says, this is a petition for Stewart Dunaway from a road from his plantation to downtown Hillsboro, and you go, not interested. I'm looking for Howard's blacksmith shop. Read on, because then I'm going to say the road runs from my plantation to... And so the pieces between the begin and end point in the entrance of the petition is a ton of information. So, warning. And railroads. When you look at the road requests, when they go from general access to things and the railroad comes across the state, well, everything was, I want a road to the station. Definitely an impact. Now I'm going to give you an example. It's going to be very brief. You can focus on the underlined words. This is a petition in Bertie County, 1782, where a road was blocked. Some guy put a fence like, you're not coming through here. It begins in saying, well, you know, years ago, a road known by the name of Wickham Road. Now, probably the most common email I'll get is someone say, hey, do you know where the Great Road is in blah, blah, blah county? Did the king go across that? The king's, you know, so they do give them names. It's not an official process. But so we get a name. To a landing called Marsh Haven, where a ferry was kept many years and lately known by Fry's Ferry. These records have a lot of what I call anecdotal historical information. Why is this guy telling you, well, you know it today, well, why didn't he just say it was Fry's Ferry? So now you have a bit of history. If you're researching Marsh Haven Ferry, you'll find out that it really was, at this point, it was Fry's Ferry. He goes on and says, for delivering of tar, coals, and other commodities. So as I'm transcribing this piece of paper, I go, oh, I bet you this guy runs a naval store because he's talking about getting the tar, coals, and commodities across this ferry. And for receiving articles from Edenton. So now he's defining not only is it we're sending stuff out, we're getting things in from Edenton, so we have connecting tissue. But here's the interesting part. So then he goes, oh, Cochrane fenced it and prevents many convenient privileges to us, especially our carting what fish we catch by wares and nets. This was a fisherman. Wasn't a naval operator. So here's a fisherman complaining he can't get his fish, probably to Edenton, and look at what all he's provided in these records. And this is just one of thousands of records that you'll go, I can't believe this. Now, bridges. Bridge records have a very unique and important role for anyone researching where is the road today. That's another most common thing I get. Oh, do you know exactly where Cornwallis? Yeah, Cornwallis Avenue in Durham. That's where he was going to shop. So bridge records are important in two aspects. They're always above or below a ford crossing. Always above it or below it. They rarely ever destroy a ford. Now, for those that don't know, a ford is a shallow, if it's natural, it's a very rare location in a river. It's shallow, it's broad. And when it becomes a public ford, they'll go out there and rake the gravel and make sure wagons can go across the river. So they usually leave the bridges. So all this will provide you is, if you go back into early 18th century records, you're going to see references to ford crossings. Example in Orange County, the Piney Ford crossing, which probably was way back even with the Indians, will become the Trollinger Bridge. So all I'm saying is that you have this historical connecting tissue by the ford crossing. Now here's what I think is the most important thing. A bridge is put at a location on a river that today, 9 times out of 10, I'll find that bridge location today, and I don't care if it's 1750 or 1840, because we tend not to destroy rivers. In other words, when Cornwallis or Tarleton was fighting in the Revolution in downtown Burlington, I can guarantee you there's no road remnants in downtown Burlington. They leveled that thing back in the 1800s. So my point is, roads are always messed with. Bridges, bridge abutments, and bridge locations, are relatively there. Now, so when you're researching for where is this stuff at, you can get the bridge location and put that pin on a map. You now know the crossing point. And then bridges are erected for only one purpose, and it's going from one place to another. And this connecting tissue, a bridge for Hillsborough to Chapel Hill, you have now your endpoints, begin and endpoints, and a crossing location. And from that, you can tend to try to then understand the road route. So my long epistle is, if you find the bridge, if you have bridge records preserved, if you find the bridge, it's easier to work backwards to find the road routes from them. Now, another posting note, there are toll bridges in North Carolina. It was a British thing. They're very rare. And my gut tells me there was no return on investment. Now, a toll bridge meant that a wealthy individual out of his own pocket has a bridge built. He goes to the county and says, I want to charge people to use it, but it's regulated by the county. So it's not a free market economy. It's a utility. And so then he finally finds out he's got to put a new deck across the bridge, and then they disappear. So anyways, there are toll bridges. Now, some of the records have details about the bridge construction. Now, there are no 18th century bridge blueprints. There are no 19th century wooden bridge blueprints. However, there is what I call, those who build models will understand, a construction list. So they'll say all the pieces of the bridge and their dimensions. But you're not going to. Now, what you say in the background was a steel bridge. Now, when we come to the steel bridge, oh yeah, there's blueprints, there's drawings, there's a lot of details. So this is a bridge. King Bridge Company was real big in North Carolina. It's actually a Virginia company. Then you'll find the schematics or blueprints. Now, why would you not use the court minutes as opposed to rummaging through these boxes? And it really comes into the details. So the fact is, you will have to use the court minutes anyways, because our old 18th century records were just never preserved. Example, Orange County. Of course, I lived there, so I always default to that. 1752. There are no road records from 1752. The oldest road record begins in 78. So from 1752 to 1778, there are no records. Where do you go? Court. Now, what happens in court is, I go in and says, Stewart Dunaway, and this is what the clerk's going to do. Stewart Dunaway came in the court, petitioned for a road from his plantation to Hillsborough. Now, I give to the court my 5 pieces of paper, which we hope to be preserved, that says all the details, why, where's to go, blah, blah, blah. So that's the difference between going to the court minutes and going to the boxes, is the details in the petition records and the jury reports are not going to be in the court minutes, okay? You rarely will even see the court saying, order the sheriff to get 12 freeholders, and that's it. So this is the main reason. Now, we can flip this side to the overseer records, which make me go nuts. It's the opposite. In the boxes, there's these little tiny slips that say, and there's thousands of them. They'll say, Stewart Dunaway's appointed overseer of the road from his plantation to Hillsborough with the following hands, Frank, Mike, blah, blah, blah. The court minutes, 9 times out of 10, match that exactly. I would never recommend going to these boxes to find overseer appointments if the court minutes have been transcribed. No, there's nothing missing. Now, I just have to say as a side note, Larry Cates with the NCGS Journal said that they had problems with the court records, and he has published a series on a particular county by using the court records, or the bridge record, road records, to regurgitate, if you will, a list of freeholder names. So I didn't put it on my slide, but that's another idea. If anybody's ever doing court records and go, boy, these things were destroyed, well, go look at those. Go look at all these legal documents, and maybe a way to get them back. Now, for a bridge, because we're spending money, the minutes of the court tend to say why. Usually, you won't see, Stewart Dunaway wants a bridge. Oh yeah, sure. It'll say, like in Hillsborough, the residents continue to complain about the Old Town Ford. High water is now, therefore, Stewart Dunaway's petitioned for a bridge to be erected in downtown Hillsborough on the Eno River. So there's a little more preamble with bridge records than with the road. Well, now for the bad news. Maps and drawings are very rare. In fact, this book here I took as I'm transcribing these records, this has every map and drawing I have found in 23,000 pieces of paper. Okay? Very minimal. Broke my heart. I knew somebody was going to say, yeah, let's move this road because Cornwallis came through here. Oh, he burned, the British burnt the bridge? Nada. Nothing. No. Now, 18th century, I'll bet you there are 3 maps. So I've transcribed all the 18th century road and bridge records all over with. It's just bad. And so then we cut into the common theme I'm sure you all know from the archives, You either have found a pot of gold or you have found nothing. I mean, even these maps are what I call stick figure drawings, like somebody had a napkin at the bar, versus a real survey. So this is a sad thing. Now, here's an idea that I just throw out there as, wouldn't it be neat to get a copy or a reproduction like this, like a drawing, to say this level of paper or this particular type of map, get this into the county maps, not moving the original, but just getting a reproduction, so that when someone comes into the map collection, have I seen all the Wake County maps? Oh yeah, no, they're in these boxes. So that's just an idea I just throw out there. Here's an example. This is what I had in my hand. This is Mr. Brazier's watercolor original survey in Wake County. It's a beauty. Now, you know he did the state, but obviously it's a very accurate map. Fantastic map, Wake County. It's not even, I even told the people at the UNC digital map guys, and they're like, anyway, so can't get anybody interested in these maps. Here's one in Caswell County. I'm going to crop in at this one location. It was a road petition arguing about changing a road. And lo and behold, here is Yancey's old mill. I did a mill survey of Caswell County. Grabbed this map, headed out with the car, went out there. Well, guess what? I found it. And the old bridge abutments are still there. And this is great. It's like real government funding. There's this giant concrete bridge, huge. You could drive houses across this thing down to this tiny little two-lane road. It's absolutely beautiful, a monster bridge. And just off the area is the old bridge abutments for this location. And then I went down the river, and there was the mill. These are very accurate maps. This is Caswell County. And I got an email from a guy in Virginia doing Caswell research. Says, are there any maps missing or any old maps you recommend? Well, I emailed him this JPEG. It really, some of these really would be merit to be in a higher view. Now here is downtown Nashville. It gives you a different kind of perspective, arguing I think it was over a sidewalk. And then my stick figure drawing, old route, new route, kind of self-explanatory. Now I may not recommend reproducing this, but now let me just pose this to you. When you look at this map, it begs questions. Let me tell you what you can derive from it. Well, this is all assumptions. This looks like an old road. This was the old road route. I'm guessing this is probably a Ford location. We see a mill located here. And then we see two dark black lines. There is a tendency to make a mill dam wide enough to become a roadway. Very common. And it's my guess, by looking at this map, here's the old dam, he's going to probably erect a new dam, and they're saying, hey, why don't we put the road through here? And then he puts pond on this river. So this is definitely a mill pond. So although we have no standalone information, there's nobody that didn't say Stewart's Mill or doesn't say a lot, doesn't say what river it is, still, this is the value of these drawings. Now, ordinary records, as I travel around, I find these are probably the most misunderstood. I'll tell people, oh, well, I have ordinary bonds, trying to sell my wares, and they look at you like, huh? And then I'll say tavern, and they go, oh, a bar. And they miss the point that really we're talking about is a motel, a licensed utility, fixed rates, fixed fees for people to travel. There's not a lot of detail in an ordinary bond. Because it's mostly pre-printed form, I think the clerk, to save time, just says, in the county. I'm like, oh, why didn't you tell me what town? Orange County drove me nuts. Orange County. Oh, great. So they don't provide, and you're going to have to dig around into the court minutes because of the lack of the preservation. When you see the preservation of these records, you'll get a better understanding of it. Now, I don't mean to be, but I'm going to point out there's an interesting cataloging in my favorite drawers I hang around in. All of the bonds, all county bond records for ordinaries are in the miscellaneous, my favorite place, the miscellaneous, and then you go back and you go into the miscellaneous box under miscellaneous. And then you have a tab for the bonds. The tab for the bonds are the official bonds and the bastardy bonds. Well, I happened to be going, I said, all done. I've got all the ordinary records done. And lo and behold, Warren and Stokes County, they have the ordinary bonds listed in the official bond. 2 counties out of a dozen. Anyways, here's what they look like. Even in 18th century, they tended to be pre-printed form. And it's just because it's all state legal preamble about what they're mandated to do. And again, wholesome food, clean lodging, and you had to provide gasoline for the vehicle, fodder, hay, whatever. And because it's regulated by the county, guess what? When you close the door on the old motel, can't charge more than $125, well, you can't charge more. Well, did they serve Pepsi-Cola at that time period? Well, no. So yes, there was alcohol being there. Now, let me point this out. British law had a term called a tippling house. A tippling house bond is very, very rare. A tippling house is a bar. You drink, get drunk, and pass out. That's a tippling house. And like I said, there are very few of them. They really they limited them because of the bond amount. So you had to have a large net worth to be able to pull that off. Oh, and by the way, here it is. James Patterson, keep an ordinary at Chapel Hill University. So this was a good bond as opposed to at his home in Orange County. Thank you. Now, mill records. There are 2 types of mills according to state law, and that is wind-powered mill and water-powered mill. I gave a presentation on mills, and this guy in the back goes, "You're forgetting the ones about all the donkeys that went around." Yeah, I understand, but these were the regulated ones. You didn't have to go get a license for your donkey. If you're going to dam up a river or get a windmill, you had to go through the court process. There are no windmill records preserved. Doggone it. The East Coast County is, well, obviously where they're going to be. But in the road records, a guy said, it's a great record. It's a big, long one. He's going, I've been working now for years. I have my windmill now up, and I need a road officially. It was really a private road. He wanted to make it public so everybody can come to his mill. And he was all happy and started talking about it. So you can find them through the road records, but unfortunately there are no windmills. Now, there are a ton of state regulations about the mills. And Orange County, don't tell me, I don't want to hear, and they never followed them. I surveyed Alamance County mills in a particular water basin region, found the mill remnants, found the deed records. I did the chain of title. I found the wills that allowed them to raise and lower the dam. And there is not a single court minute, nor is there a petition anywhere in any court, nothing. And I think it's the Germans like, let them, don't bother us. That Western Orange County is a disaster, not a single record. So all I'm pointing out is there's a lot of frustration when people say, I know there's a mill, but I can't find anything, nor in the paperwork or in the court minutes. And all you can say is, sorry, yes, that's a fact. It's an anomaly, and I've done a lot of mill research. Now there are petitions, which is what we want to find. They're not that well preserved like a lot of these records. You're going to have to use court records and road records. Remember, you're not going to get your grain to the mill without a road. So I find more mills through the road records than I do anywhere else. Because, again, when I go back to, I don't mean to be so reiterative, but it's back to this whole issue that you're trying to find in the court records where this guy was approved to build the mill, and yet there's a road petition to the mill, and there's no mill record. Anyways, so use the road records, great place. Now, why are there legal records? All of this is about the ability to, for the rivers, was damming up the rivers. Clearly, you're no longer going to be navigating the river. When you dam up a river, you alter how things flow. So the laws were about that, but more importantly, it was the ability of eminent domain. If I owned, because when you live on a river, you own to the center of the river, and Mr. Smith owns across the river, and I want to erect a mill, I petition the court comes out and sends a commission, and they go out and survey where the mill pond's going to be, and they then value Mr. Smith's land, and it's gone. No ands, ifs, or buts. Later on in life, they've altered the law to allow some argument. But anyways, the whole point was, why would you care about a windmill? You're not going to control the wind flowing on the land. It was about the ability to go across onto someone else's land and take it without any argument, other than you did pay for it. So again, that's what this was all about. Not the licensing like you are doing with an ordinary. And here, if you're lucky, there will be actually, the commission goes out and they survey it and they give you the river and you go, wow, there it is. These are very rare. Now, their lawsuits are the place for information. I used to cringe when I see the lawsuits. Now, when I'm talking about lawsuits, I'm talking about the folders within these records. And I'm not going into the court minutes. I'm not going to court boxes. This is in the mill box or road boxes. There's just a ton of papers in there. They are absolutely packed full of a ton of information. Relatives, they bring expert witnesses. When I finally did the Wake County mill records, man, people were going nuts. They brought in, nobody wanted a mill. They all were arguing about, I don't want this mill. Guy says, I want to build, no mill. They bring in an expert, and he goes through in the 1790s, and he lists every single mill, its distance from this proposed location, who owned it, what its expertise was, better known for sawing, better for grain, better for flour, for the whole survey of the county. In a lawsuit, as an expert witness. Warning, stuff is fantastic. Lady in Rowan County, husband died, mill flooded her property. Man, oh man, did she rattle on. Who died next door, who they sold it to, just it's full of information. All these lawsuits are dealing with flooding and disease. There was a belief in the early 1800s of miasma killed people. It originated out of Italy, in the swamps of Italy. It came to America as a finding. State of North Carolina then puts in an act of assembly that made lawyers just happy. It allowed a mill owner to be legally liable for his mill pond with 5 years in arrears liability. And when I graphed the lawsuits, it's like no lawsuits, oh, boom. As soon as that act of assembly hit, everybody went, oh, I'm dying from miasma. Now, miasma is an effluent. It's a gas that comes off of a stagnant mill pond by rotting vegetation, ethane, methane, whatever. Well, they finally woke up. It was the mosquitoes. It wasn't the gas. They just didn't know what was killing them. Now, NIBI, not in my backyard, nuclear power plant of the 1800s, boy, right here. No way. As soon as the disease was, So I've written a book on the rise and fall of grist mills in North Carolina. This is the very first stake in its death. NIBI, no way. Wake County, they were the worst. No, I don't want to die. I mean, really, people were burying their relatives. They're all dead. It's not going to die. They're dying. And so they, no. Now, when I've done all the mill records and cataloged them, still, in the quantity of types of records, the petitions are still 3/4 of the records. If I were to count pieces of paper, it'd be the flip. So when you look in the mills and you see this big giant folder, it's probably mainly lawsuit material because lawyers need tons of, they must be paid by page, just tons of paper. So then the rest is lawsuits and things. Now, Ferry Records are not all that well preserved. You'll see when you see the numbers. Not a lot of information is in there as historical. In other words, in these petitions, you start to hear a lot of ramblings about, just like we saw in 1782. They're pretty straightforward. We just want to ferry across this river. Not a lot. So you're going to have to use the court minutes. And guess who? The road records, because you can't get across the ferry without a road. So I still default back to the road records, because if the court didn't, some of the clerk was like, you'll never know about it. Now, when you see the map of where these records are, this will be self-explanatory. Well, duh. You know, the bays of East Coast, and then you're going to see the Yadkin PD stuff appear. It absolutely broke my heart. There is not one single record preserved about any ferry on the Dan River or any of the Virginia line rivers, because this was a crossing point in the Revolution where I spent most of my time. Nah. Now, I have a real love of a map you all have here called the County Soil Survey Maps. Absolutely priceless, especially for 3 specific areas: ferries, mills, and churches. Now, these, even if you're lucky and you get some of the early teens and 20s, these records give you insight to at least to the Civil War. I have seen some real remote places where I have gone further into research, and I can get you back to the 1820s, and it doesn't take much to get you back to the 18th century. And they're absolutely fabulous. Here is the Yadkin. This, I believe, was Davidson County. And look at them. They just hit, here are all the ferries. So you want a ferry survey? Here's a place to come. So I can't say enough about these records. And just because someone sees, well, I don't want 1920, I'm looking for 1870 or 1880. Oh, yes, you do want to come see these maps. They're absolutely priceless. Now, let me finish up here with what we have. 4,000 records, pieces of paper. So that's for all the mills. 400 for the ferry. So you can see the magnitude. Now, in fairness, there are modern ferries. So as I continue to do records in the 1890s and I may find more ferries. But at this point, there are only 400 that I have cataloged. There are 2,300 ordinary records. Now, warning. An ordinary bond is renewed every year. Caswell County has 350 of them. I thought, oh my God, these guys are drinking up there. Well, it turned out that that's about a dozen ordinaries. And it's just a repetitive. Great historically because you can see the same, the ownership change, but don't take that as a lot of physical locations. There are approximately 12,000 18th century road and bridge records. And I say that because when I catalog the records as I transcribe them, if a box says 1782 to 1820, I didn't go that level of detail. So I had to approximate, it's about 12,000. I'm currently at 21,000 of all the road and bridge, just road and bridge records. Now, using your county map, state map of the county division, I use 1780 for 18th century. This shows you where were there 18th century records preserved. And at 30,000 feet looking down, go, not bad. Oh, this Anson County, it just breaks my heart. I just knew I was going to find a ton of things. Bladen County, there's just nothing. Now, let me just be clear. This map does not tell you the most important information. Surrey County has 2 18th century records. Granville County has hundreds of 18th century records. So remember, depth and breadth are not alluded here. Where are the ferries? There you go. So we have the Yadkin PD stuff, Catawba. We had 2 on the Haw River, and then your stuff. But look at all this stuff that's missing. Then when you look at mills in a general sense, pretty good coverage if you wanted to say, was there a record for it? There were thousands of grist mills in North Carolina, and they're just not well preserved, so that's it. Ordinaries, kind of a helter-skelter, you can't really pin anything on it. And yet you would think this whole area would be full because, even over here, again, not well preserved. Now, in my last slide, this is showing you counties that have nothing, nada, not even one piece of paper. And in a certain sense, in fairness, remember, Alamance and Durham, at a time period, they're in the Orange County records. But then when you know that Alamance was formed in 1849, 1850 records would be pretty neat. Nada, nothing. So, not bad. Really, not bad. Now, there's a thing called dockets, which is a book, And it tends to be 1870-ish, and it's back to this beginning of the road supervisor. I'm not going to deal with those books. There they are. Not a lot of them. And then here's my last slide showing where I am working and what has been done. So either Tuesday or Wednesday I'll be in on Robson, and then Iredell I just finished last night. So pretty good coverage. But again, I can't tell you there are certain counties that I stopped to get the 18th century done. Pasquotank and Perquimans have boxes. So this doesn't mean every box has been completed. I've at least got the 18th century all done. And who doesn't want to walk one of those old roads? All right, questions? Yes, Doug?
Have you found anything about slaves mentioned in the road records, about putting slaves to work on roads or bridges now?
Yes. You'll find them in the bridge records. After the Civil War, they tend to name them. Prior to the Civil War, I don't believe I've ever seen. It was in the law. The law said for hands were defined at a male of a certain age, and in their place you could put so many slaves in your stead. You will never see them mentioned in like a name mentioning. But after the Civil War, I've seen a number of bridge records where they'll say you owe, so-and-so parentheses COL dot, or they'll say Negro Sam or whatever, and then they're getting their pay. That's the only place I've seen it. Wow. All right. Well, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Where is that road?
This is the British are on this one. This is in Alamance County. This is Orange County's second ferry called Galbraith Ferry Road. If you're in Alamance County, they changed his name to Galbraith, G-I-L instead of G-A-L. But this is the Galbraith Ferry Road. It was there in the 1750s, and they kept improving it and improving it and widening it and improving it, and it's still there today. It's on city property, and it'll be there forever.
Tell us about your books. What do you have in your published resources?
I'm sorry, what?
Tell us what you have in your published resources.
Yeah, so what I do, and this is why I'm in here photographing, I photograph the records to give the people the image of the records, and then I transcribe a lot of, because there's legal words there, I skip the legalese wording. So then I transcribe, and then I index so that you can go into an index and find last name, comma, first name, indexing, and then because I know I do a lot of research, historical research, and writing books from that, I know the keywords: deceased, widows, death, killings. I've even seen murders being discussed in the road records. It's because there's someone's arguing and they then go off in the tangent and talk about it. I found in Orange County where they hung a slave. They were buried in the road records, and when James was here, we got those put out, and they finally found out that was related to the Ku Klux Klan. And they were hiding the records because it said where he was buried. They knew the slave, they didn't know where he was buried. Guess where the buried record was? It was hidden in the road records. Now we know where he was buried. So, yeah, so I do on a county-by-county basis those types of things for genealogists, and mainly for libraries. That was my whole mission, was to get these into public libraries so people could go to the library and have access to the books. I mean, you want to go to sleep, read one of those things. Cure insomnia. Any other questions? Well, great. Well, thank you all very much for your time.